I've been floating in the float tank all the livelong day. I've been floating in the float tank just to pass the time away. Can't you hear the music fading? Rise up and get your clothes on. Can't you hear the owner shouting? Dinah, run the filtration. Dinah, won't you run? Dinah, won't you run? Dinah, won't you run the filtration? Dinah, won't you run? Dinah, won't you run? Dinah, won't you run that pump? All right.
Hey, welcome everybody.
Choo-choo. Hop aboard the Daily Solutions Express.
Right? Am I right? Where does it take you?
Well, it takes you right over to Information Land, my friend.
Great. That's guy. Yeah, I've been meaning to go visit Information Land.
Yeah, I think we both need to pay a visit, actually. Okay, I'm Graham.
I'm Ashkahn.
And today's question is, do you know how many centers has shut down in this past year and why they've shut down?
Has shut down?
How many has shut down, yeah.
I think probably most have been shutting down because of grammatical errors.
Yeah, it's a real killer. And the U.S. Census shows that not just for float tanks, but for most small businesses that can be. Yeah.
Well, 90% go out of business in the first year because of grammatical errors.
I mean, this is kind of an easy question for us because I have no idea how many have shut down.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to track.
We're still here.
Yeah,
we're
so
still
at least
going
one
strong,
is
you know?
The difficult thing about knowing how many float centers have shut down is that when you're closing your business, you don't have a lot of motivation to
reach out and
cross all your T's and dot all your I's. Or spreading the news is not something that's high on your list. Even going and like clearing your float center off of directories you were listed on or maps that you're on, like none of that stuff. You don't care. You're freaking.
And it sucks. Like you're shutting down probably unhappily, and you didn't want to, and you wanted to have this business that kept going. So, I mean, dealing with all that stuff too and letting the float world know, or even just answering a survey, if we had something for Float Tank Solutions, like we have our industry report where it's totally voluntary, I don't think that we would get anyone who fills it out after shutting down, or maybe one or two, right?
A couple people, but yeah, definitely a much lower percentage than people who are open. So I guess what's going to follow here is just gut feeling answers, because, we do hear about things and we can make some kind of semi-educated guesses based off of anecdotal experience.
Yeah.
Because definitely places have shut down.
Yes, there are places that close. There are places that sell.
Yeah.
Which is not shutting down. Like, I wouldn't even put that in this category.
Yeah. It's an interesting one because I feel like sometimes they're selling for unrelated reasons and sometimes they're selling because they probably would shut down otherwise, but want the place to keep going. And I like of the places that sell, some have good luck and do it rather quickly, and other ones
never do and
never
shut
do.
down.
So I feel like I can be pretty confident in saying that less places are closing than are opening. Like more float centers are opening by, I think, a healthy margin or even a healthy multiple than the number of places that are going out of business.
Even if you include selling in there. Like, I think more new centers are coming along than like anyone's trying to get out of the industry currently.
For sure. Like, if I had to take a guess in the U.S. of how many places have closed in the last year, I mean, I'd put it, even including everyone who's sold, I'd put it under like 20 at a high.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to just gut check it at like 20.
That feels like a very generous, high number. I would probably actually
maybe it's just really hard,
10
and it gets down to the definition even of float center to a certain degree, right? Like, if someone has a single float tank at their big wellness practice and they realize eventually, appropriately, that taking care of this float tank is like a very difficult task that they are not trained on themselves.
For sure.
Like, if they're not passionate about floating, it like within a year they could be like, you know what, this is a mistake. Sell the float tank, make this room for massage. Has that float center shut down? Yeah. Right? And I know more cases like that where it's, or like someone ran a float tank in their house and now they're moving and they ditched the float tanks. They don't want to move it across the country, and now
that one I would say
is,
like yes to those. Like those to like, I consider for the context of this conversation, someone who was offering floating and decided it wasn't worth it for whatever reason, like basically the effort or, lack of income outweighed what they were getting out of having it.
Yeah, or the difficulty or whatever. Anyway, if we're including just like removing a single tank from a spa and removing like a tank from someone's house when they move across the country and they're not offering floating to their community anymore, I might put the number a little higher. Like maybe more like 30 to 40 or something like that.
30 to 40, really?
You're including selling every center that's sold, every person who's moved across the tank and ditched their float tank.
In a year,
everyone
in 1 year.
Yeah.
It feels really high to me.
It could be high. I don't know. I mean, people move, like wellness centers like much more often will dabble in things and then get rid of them. Like that's not, and the point I guess I was making with all of that is that's not even against their plan from the beginning, like they want to experiment with something. If it's like having a single float tank is a hard thing to have in your wellness practice sometimes, especially if you're not like familiar with taking care of it, if you're not the one who's passionate about it. Especially
if you got it without realizing the maintenance and everything that goes into it.
So I'll just say that at a high side. Like so, again, if we're including all those small ones, I'll put 40 at my high point of what I think is going on.
It feels high to me. I would put it probably still that like 20 number in my head was including all those things.
Yeah, and that sounds a little low to me. So I guess that's why we're different people.
Exactly 30 places. I think is what it is. Was it just the number of places or?
What was that?
What was the question that they asked?
Oh, how many has shut down and why they've shut down.
And why, okay.
So, but let me back up, though, because the number of big places that have actually shut down as opposed to selling in the last year, I'd put a lot smaller.
Sure, kind of what we would consider, quote unquote, like proper float centers.
I'd say just 3 tanks or more, and they shut down.
And that's the focus of what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah. And floating is the focus of what they're doing, and that's who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking at a lot less.
Somewhere like
under 10.
Under 10. Yeah. Nice. All right. We're back on the same page.
Yeah. Okay. It feels weird whenever we're off page. Yeah. Okay. So there's a general context why they've shut down. I mean, this gets into a really interesting territory because lots of times we don't know. And even people who I know, I've talked to them personally and talked to them about shutting down. They're probably painting a little nicer picture of things than it would be otherwise. I've heard from some people, they're just like, hey, I got offered this great job and I'm going to be doing that now. And if my center were struggling and I also got offered a great job, I'd probably focus on saying that I'm doing this great job, not that my center was struggling, So it's just, even if you're in contact with someone shutting down, it's hard to get necessarily the honest answer out of them.
I think, I feel like part of what goes into people making these decisions is that the idea of a lot of changes in your life are, I think, incompatible with the idea of maintaining a float center. It's not an easy business to move by any means, right? So let's say you want to move cities, the idea of reopening another float center in another city is basically just the same idea as opening a whole brand new business again. I think another one is that if you maybe didn't spend as much money or cut a lot of corners in your initial construction, you might find a point 2-3 years in where you're facing $100,000, $150,000 of renovations to get your whole place back up to snuff. And that's a big decision point. And so I think it's just the nature of a float center kind of pushes you to these points where you just have to make a grave decision like that sometimes when the circumstances appear. So I could see that being one of the reasons why, as opposed to someone who has an online business who maybe they don't close it down, but it just kind of becomes a smaller part of their life in the background or something like that. Yeah. It's just hard to run a float center and be doing a lot of other big opportunities in your life, or if something else comes up, it's not the easiest thing to balance with other stuff.
So I think you touched on 2 really good ones. There's opportunities, like you're moving to another city, you're doing some big life change, your parents need you to take care of them because they're getting older or whatever.
Yeah.
Bad construction initially, because there are definitely centers I know that both close down and sell because the prospect of going through a massive renovation is just too much for them, either financially or even emotionally. And
we just heard from one place that they're closing because the landlord wouldn't renew their lease because their float tank did so much damage to the building in their current lease. Again, it's not the most common story in the world that I hear, but it's a good kind of tale to understand has actually happened to somebody. They didn't protect their building enough to the point that their landlord was just I'm not going to let you keep being in this building.
So quick interjection there too, just as a public service announcement or something, which is do your float construction research. There's a lot of great information out there now. And don't just trust your contractors. when you're talking to them. Some of these unfortunate remodels are as a result of trusting contractors who said that they knew better and they've totally worked with wet environments, but they have not worked with this much salt.
There's a lot of air quotes going on there. You guys couldn't see? But...
Yeah, very, very dramatic air quotes. I hope it came through in my voice. Anyway, in a public service announcement, just take great care in your construction. It's one of the most costly, devastating things to get wrong. Again, and you won't even know until 2-3 years in sometimes. So,
and we've heard a couple times of people not getting their leases renewed. And again, that's another thing that just pushes you to that decision point. Like not getting your lease renewed and having to change locations is again almost as big of a decision as starting up a whole float center again from scratch. Like you'll still have your customers, which is nice as opposed to moving cities, but financially, like the cost of doing that construction again is a huge decision to make.
I'll do two for the price of one as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bonus.
Yeah. Woohoo! So both people who have launched alone, who've just started a float center with no one else around, and there are lots of successful solopreneurs out there who are running float centers. But that said, it can also be trying running any small business by yourself. And sometimes with a float center, we've talked about whether or not to have partners in another episode, but it can be trying, you know, and even if you're just, as I like to say, banging your head against a brick wall, it's really nice to have someone there banging their head against the same wall. So I think things that are exhausting anyway can just be a little more exhausting with one person. And bonus, partner disputes. I've heard of places selling,
sure.
and I don't think I know of any place shutting down, but I know of at least 2 or 3 that we're trying to sell as a result of partners who were getting into arguments and
so
couldn't
don't
handle
have
it.
business partners, but also don't start without business partners.
Exactly, bonus. Yeah,
super useful.
Or more like take great care.
Yeah.
No matter which direction you go, right? They both have their pros and cons, and weighing them appropriately is really important beforehand.
Yep.
They often say that a business partnership is even more intense than a marriage. So, date first, I guess. Or...
Open some smaller, easier business. Yeah, I guess as long as we're going down the path of all the things that can happen to people to kind of
ruin their lives.
To ruin their lives. I feel like another one is
not listening to our podcast. I was going to say the same thing.
Big mistake. Yeah. You know, you open a float center, and I think, it's hard to have the instinct to get your float center to a place where it kind of can run functionally without consuming your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people can end up in a situation where they're starting to get burnt out from how much work they're putting into this. But that's the point where they start thinking about like, man, I should bring some people on or get this so it's not kind of so much pressure on me. And in some cases, it's just kind of too late, you know, like you're at the point where you're already at your rope's end and kind of exhausted. And the idea of starting there to try to get your place to get people trained up and run smoothly without you is kind of a big thing to tackle. So it's something that we think should be top of mind. And we gave a talk at the Float Conference a couple of years ago to kind of be thinking about making your business sustainable and realizing that you want to bring other people in to kind of have the knowledge and experience that you do before you're completely exhausted. And the idea of throwing in the towel is more appealing to you than getting your business to kind of run sustainably.
Yeah. So go watch that conference talk. That's a good one. I'd like to end on a positive note.
Okay.
As well.
They're selling it because they won the lottery and they invested in
or other cool things.
Shop.
Like, I mean, you talked a little bit about, life changes and stuff, but sometimes it's just they actually do have some really cool life opportunity that's come up.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I know one center that was selling because their podcast had just taken off and gotten nationally syndicated, right. And they were like rocking it, and that's what they were really passionate about was this health podcast that they were doing. And it's one of the best reasons you can sell is because some other part of your life is so successful you no longer have the time to devote to your center,
Which makes sense, Like I don't think we should always look at ending something you're doing as a failure or...
No.
You just got to realize that time is finite and you got to put your energy where you want to put it. And sometimes you have to make compromises or stop doing something that even if you love doing it, just because there's something else that's calling you more.
Yeah, in a long enough timeline, all float centers suffer the heat death of the universe. So, all right.
Anyway, so
I'm sorry. I also think that's a positive note. It
is positive.
We're all the same matter.
We're all
all
same.
Become the
so
same
whether you quit now or you quit later, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So this is the last episode of this podcast. We're
happy Flag Day, everyone.
Yeah, wrapping it up here.
No, we're around for a while. We're around. We're go head to our website. You go there. You go over to our website. Send us questions.
Go to floatanksolutions.com/podcast. And yeah, I mean, it'll be great for you. It'll be great for us. It'll be really nice for everybody.
Children will rejoice.
Children rejoice. We'll send you a small token of our appreciation.
Oh,
baby.
Okay. We will.
Keep it mysterious.
The next person who sends in a podcast question, we're going to send them a nice. If you put your address in,
your address in.
You put your address in that podcast.
Mention
suggestion.
that we said this, so we remember.
Yep. In fact, if you're anyone who's listening to this today,
if you're questionnaire number 9, lucky questionnaire number 9, you'll get a prize.
Anyway, send us a question. We'll send you some stuff. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.